David Ketchum purchased his family home in 1849 from an East Jamaican merchant named Henderson. This beautiful home had endured for almost 2 centuries when my mother discovered it and made it her family home in 1990. Little did our mother know, but when she purchased this outstanding gem of a house, what looked like a little piece of the country dropped right in the middle of the hustle and bustle that is New York City, she had opened the door for the rediscovery of an important relic from the past. Visitors, delivery people, and even historians are excited by the find when they come across this old house.
We're in a neighborhood called Hollis. We're here to show you a historical house that dates to 1849. We're going to tell you a little bit more about this house because it actually has a very interesting history too. And no one better to do it than Jason Antos, the president of the Queens Historical House, and a man who has written 7 books on the history of Queens.
And just very quickly, we're taking a look at the beautiful Ketcham House, 1848, 1849. All right, so this is a prime example of a pre-Civil War era home. It's one of the only examples of a pre-Civil War era homestead anywhere in this area. Just take a look at it. I mean, it's really incredible. And yeah, it's something that's been somewhat overlooked by time, and is a survivor, and it's still here with us today. And hopefully we can preserve it. It's in very good shape, and we can preserve it for future generations.
Our mother had not only acquired an amazing home where her family could grow and flourish, but she had also bought into an irreplaceable 200-year-old legacy of family, community, caring, and sharing. My late sister Faye and I stumbled across some old photos. Wow! Our home had been dubbed the Ketcham House. The images opened a floodgate of other discoveries. Sylvia's legacy is now adjoined to those of some outstanding makers and shapers of local history. And we're excited to have the honor of becoming caretakers for this long-lost chapter of American history. In his 20s, David Ketchum and his young family moved to a beautiful span of land called East Jamaica, where he served the community in various capacities. He sat on the draft board during the Civil War. He was a highway commissioner, a land assessor, and as such, sat on the board of directors of the town of Jamaica. He was a grand juryman, a farming representative, a school commissioner, church clerk, founder of a local church, and ultimately a highly revered member of the community. 16 years after moving to the farmhouse, Mary and David lost their 16-year-old daughter, Elizabeth. Their son, Aaron Oakley, married and had 2 sons of his own. A. Oakley ran the Ketchum farm and was also very active in the community. Passing away at age 40, he left his young sons in the care of his wife and father. In later years, the only surviving descendant, Ketchum's grandson and namesake David Warren Ketchum, found success in the finance industry and applied his energies, expertise, and finances to assist in many worthy causes. David Ketchum played a major role as an advocate for the community. In young East Jamaica, Ketchum attended farming conventions to represent his fellow farmers and to learn more about his profession. And he often traveled as befitted his duty as land assessor. Both Ketchum and his son Aaron Oakley were elected as officers of the Union Grange of the National Grange of the Order of Patrons of Husbandry, the oldest national agricultural advocacy group, which was founded after the Civil War in 1867. They were there to encourage families to band together for the economic and political well-being of agriculture, the community, and family. The entire family was a very integral part of their community. Eldest grandson Frank Lott Ketchum served the community as a volunteer fireman, although he passed in his early 30s. As the municipality grew, the Ketchums were always there at the inception of each and every civic and religious organization. They were often elected to take leadership roles in the community. Members of the Ketchum family sat on church, school, athletics, youth, farming, and other community and advocacy boards. They were jury and grand jury members and were selected in the roles of clerks, secretaries, treasurers, presidents, and vice presidents for the various civic, religious, and genealogical organizations. When the borough of Queens was annexed to New York City, the School District 43 was formed to govern schools in Flushing and Jamaica, two of the three towns of Queens at that time, the other being Newtown, now known as Long Island City. The community again called upon David Ketchum to serve even though he was 1 year short of his 80th birthday. He was appointed secretary with the proviso that he get an assistant. At his advanced age, David Ketchum still continued to play an integral role in the administration of the school system, with the same passion and fortitude he had displayed in years gone by. Grandson David Warren Ketchum became the head of the trust department for a branch of the Bank of Manhattan, which was formed by Aaron Burr and was the second largest bank in the United States, now known as J.P. Morgan Chase Manhattan Bank. D.W. Ketchum became a staunch and very visible advocate for healthcare support in New York. He seemed determined to make sure that healthcare was accessible to all. Ketchum worked hard to help develop Jamaica Hospital and eventually became an honored trustee. A plaque bearing his name still hangs there today. The Ketchum family served together and worshipped together and were very much at the spiritual epicenter of the community. When the family church was too far away for an aging David Ketchum to attend, he became a founding member of a more local church, St. Gabriel's Episcopal, which is still active in Hollis, Queens today. A plaque with the Ketchum family's name is posted in the sanctuary. The Ketchums were there as carriage wheels morphed into automobiles, continually representing the town and the people until the last of the line, D.W. Ketchum, was laid to rest. D.W. Ketchum married twice but did not have children. He was the last of his grandfather's line of Ketchums. The farm would be given new life again and again. Pressured to sell by the railroad, A. Oakley and his father's Ketcham House remained the only dwellings on the expansive Ketchum farm. The two worked side by side, and when A. Oakley passed, it was a tremendous blow to his father. He made up his mind to sell. A wealthy businessman from Brooklyn, Alexander Campbell, fell in love with the beauty of the Ketchum property and purchased it with the aim of using the area for a residence as well as for his dairy business, which had grown to be one of the largest retail distributors of milk in the country. Alexander Campbell, who was very committed to the science behind safer and cleaner milk, founded the first creamery for bottled milk in the United States, utilizing cutting-edge pasteurization processes. Credited with being the first to introduce bottled milk on the market, he instituted a worldwide reform for safer milk, which marked the end of the can and dipper, and for the first time placed the milk business on a sanitary basis. The introduction of the glass milk bottle was accomplished with difficulty, but it changed the course of history. 2 years after his death, Alexander Campbell's milk company merged with Borden's Milk, a company that's synonymous with milk even in the 21st century. Whatever became of his plans for the Ketchum property? As was customary at the time, the Long Island Railroad Company would acquire land and establish towns along its route. When Frederick W. Dunton, the nephew of the owner of the Long Island Land Improvement Company, arrived in the area just east of Jamaica, he felt he had found a new home. He wanted to establish a town on the grounds of the Ketchum farm. Ketchum was not so easily convinced, but Dunton would not be deterred. He purchased surrounding farms, built his home, which he called Hollis Hall, and waited for another opportunity. That opportunity arose when Ketchum released his land to the dairyman Alexander Campbell. In 1895, Alexander Campbell, in a lawsuit against Dunton, put up the land he had acquired for his dairy for public sale. Records indicate that Dunton was not the most scrupulous of people, and somehow he managed to have it the railroad way. The tracts of land that Alexander Campbell had planned to use for his dairy and residence went up for public sale. In the end, Frederick Dunton did have his way, and the town of Hollis was founded. The two dwellings on the Ketchum farm remained in the hands of the original owners. And it's interesting to note that as Hollis was being subdivided for sale, the Ketcham House and the Aaron Oakley Ketcham House remained as uniquely oversized properties throughout the years. About 100 years ago, the old farmhouse got a facelift. All the beautiful elements that made this house such a shining example of pre-Civil War architecture remained. The Ketchum House continues to stand tall and proud and is even more beloved today as an important relic from the past.
One of America's most popular female images, who graced the pages of every leading national magazine. The Gibson Girl captured an era with her independence, self-assurance, and above all, her beauty. She mirrored and influenced popular culture, just as tabloids and television do today, and she set a whole new standard for romantic love and became a symbol of her age, glorifying the American girl. The 1890s belonged to Charles Daly Gibson as much as they did to the Gibson Girl. More than any other illustrator of his generation, he was able to communicate what was in vogue, resurrect romantic love, and capture the hearts and imagination of the public with a pretty woman that they could wholeheartedly call American.
May Callahan was just another clerk in a shoe store in Manhattan when a woman artist, struck by her beautiful red hair, asked her to model. Soon after, she was introduced to Charles Dana Gibson, and the Gibson Girl was born. It was reportedly May Callahan's beauty and poise that inspired Charles Dana Gibson to create his sketches that so immortalized the beauty of women. May Callahan was very successful in her modeling career. She was also a star of living pictures. And newspaper clippings report that it was she who was the actual model for the statue that once stood atop Madison Square Garden.
One of the most beautiful things to see in New York at the time. She was lit up at night and she rotated, and you would have the lights bouncing off her gilded surface in the evening and at night.
When May Callahan met her husband, Frederick Flores, an Argentinian model who posed for sculptures, she quit full-time modeling and eventually retired to the quiet life of a Queens housewife, but returned to the headlines in 1950 when the Museum of the City of New York opened a Charles Dana Gibson exhibit. Mrs. Flores suddenly found herself in the limelight again, besieged for radio, TV, and other appearances. One of the beauties of an old house is that as the world changes around us, an old house anchors us to the past. Exploring a house like this is like unlocking a time capsule, revealing the rich tapestry of memories and experiences that make up its history. The Ketcham House is filled with items from antiquity that have been preserved to allow future generations to have hands-on experience with things from the past. Though anchored to the past, the Ketcham House continually forges forward into the future. This treasured home has found renewed purpose. Lodging for guests, a place to learn English and explore New York City from a comfortable home, and filmmaking. In 2010, an award-winning director literally stumbled upon the Ketcham House as he scouted out locations for a film that required a supernatural leap from the past to the present. Bingo! He kept saying the house was the main character of the film, with several major stars on board, including Michael Imperioli and Wendell Pierce. They made some major transformations to create an atmosphere that would match the chaos and disrepair in the film. In doing so, they actually demonstrated the incredible filmmaking potential of the Ketcham House. An old house is like a treasure chest overflowing with precious gems of our history and heritage, just waiting to be opened and explored. It's a special treasure trove of whispered tales from bygone days. A strongbox that safeguards invaluable memories from the past.
In 1790, George Washington took a grand tour of Long Island. His tour was considered a victory lap. After winning the American Revolution, he traveled to Long Island to thank the members of the Culper Spy Ring of Setauket and others, who played a key role in the victory.
Okay, our first stop in Suffolk on the George Washington tour. And right here was a stone saying that on this spot stood the Zebulon Ketchum homestead, wherein so this was George Washington's first stop in Suffolk County on his tour of Long Island.
The Ketcham House, where George Washington dined in 1790, was lost in 1857. One article noted in 1928,
For many years, this old home was pointed out as the place where George Washington spent the night on his tour of Long Island. Now that the house is gone, few persons would remember all the history that took place on the spot, and in another generation, after the old-timers who remember are gone too, it would be forgotten.
much as the accomplishments of David Ketchum and his family have faded from public knowledge. In fact, though Ketchum was aware that his grandfather saw George Washington march as a child, you might be surprised to know that Washington actually dined at his great-grandfather's home. Ketchum's lineage reads like a roadmap to New York City. Amongst his ancestors, there are Nostrans, Scudder, Whitman, Remsen, Rapallier, Van Wyck, relatives who founded towns, and there is the added distinction of being the sixth great-grandchild of founding mother Catalina Trico.
Catalina Trico was a young trailblazer and the first European mother in what would become New York State. In the last years of her life, Catalina shared her story with William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, affirming herself as the first European mother in the mid-Atlantic. Historians estimate that approximately 1 million descendants of Catalina Trico live in the New York area today.
Among them is poet Walt Whitman, who is kin to David Ketchum. They have deep roots and are well known in Long Island.
The Ketchum Inn has stood on this site along winding Montauk Highway since the 1600s and still remains as a reminder of what once there was. Thanks to robust preservation efforts, the inn continues to welcome visitors to eat, drink, and be merry, as well as explore its role in American and Long Island history.
It would have been served on a whaling boat. It is a beef brisket with onions, carrots.
Looks good. During the Revolution, British soldiers took over the inn, making it easy for locals to gather information on their military maneuvers. And after the war, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison stayed, ate, and drank here as well.
The history of a country is best told in a record of the lives of its people. Thomas Babington Macaulay.
As indelible a mark as the Ketchums had made on Long Island history, David Ketchum also made a long-lasting imprint upon Queens County, then Long Island and now part of the great city of New York. His accomplishments and history were outlined in his own words in the Portrait and Biographical Record of Queens County, Long Island, New York, which contains the portraits and biographical sketches of prominent and representative citizens of the county, together with biographies and portraits of all the presidents of the United States.
Instead of going to musty records and taking therefrom dry statistical matter that can be appreciated by but few, our corps of writers have gone to the people, the men and women who have, by their enterprise and industry, brought the county to a rank second to none among those comprising this great and noble state, and from their lips have the story of their life struggles.
In his biography, it was noted that David Ketchum had been before the people in various positions of honor and trust. As a citizen, he was said to be on the side of every social and moral reform. As a neighbor, he was kind, and as a friend, staunch and true. His house was said to be one of the most pleasant homes in Hollis. Numerous newspaper articles throughout the decades proved these comments to be true again and again. When David Ketchum passed away in 1910, willing his property to his grandson and namesake, David Warren Ketchum, it was noted in his obituary that he was a man of unusually fine qualities and made friends with everyone he met. Here are images that go back over 100 years before David Ketchum passed away. You can see what the area looked like in his time. This shot is from 1902. This is a view of the Long Island Railroad Station before the train tracks were elevated. I believe David Ketchum's farmhouse is slightly visible in the distance there, where that arrow is pointing. You can see how closely integrated the railroad was with the land. This is a photo of a train pulling into the Hollis station in 1900. And here is the renowned photographer William J. Murray taking a selfie. The beauty of the land and the proximity to Manhattan and Brooklyn via train made Hollis a very popular place, and there was a tremendous real estate boom in the 1920s. This is an aerial view of the Ketchum farm as it was being subdivided in 1924. You can see how expansive this farm was. When it was sold to Alexander Campbell, the farm stretched as far as present-day Springfield Boulevard, which is not shown on this aerial view. Let's see if we can zoom in to see what the Ketcham House property looked like from the air then. It was being used as a nursery before it was sold. You can see the greenhouses on this view. Homes were built on the land that the greenhouses occupied. This amazing house has stood proud and strong throughout the centuries, ever vigilant of all the changes going on around it, amassing tales that echo throughout its walls of times gone by. An impressive monument to the outstanding people who have been proud to call the Ketcham House home. Thank you for stopping by and for watching this presentation to its end. If you haven't had an opportunity to watch the other videos in the series, please check out the playlist or head on back to the channel page. In order to keep the legacy of our beloved Sylvia and our home alive, please help us to share their stories far and wide. Click the share button. Tell your family and friends. Subscribe to be notified when new videos are posted. Your comments are also very much welcomed. If there's something more you would like to learn about, please comment below. And most of all, thank you for being a friend.